joys of waiting until the sun comes up so you can film. I should have poured more coffee before I started. Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for January 5th through 11th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 1 book. I would say starting the year off strong, but technically I've already wrapped up part of this year. And I was only able to start this year off strong because I took a few days off work and we went to a cabin in the woods with no cell service and no internet, and I did a lot of reading there. The first book that I finished in the cabin in the woods that is definitely not haunted is The Postmortal. This one was recommended to me by Dustin over at BookBabble for my 40 before 40 TBR, and I enjoyed it, but it's also kind of a bummer. This book is about a man named John, and in the present that he lives in, there's something called the cure. It's not widely available yet, it's technically not even FDA approved in the United States, but basically when you get it, you stop aging. As we meet John, he's in the process of getting it. You need to go get your blood drawn, and then 2 weeks later they'll re-inject you with your blood and then also the thing that makes you stop aging, aka the cure, and then after that you're just 29 forever, or whatever age you are when you decide to get the cure. This obviously opens up a huge thought experiment of what would the world look like if people could stop aging at whatever age they took this cure. It doesn't mean they can't die, and that definitely comes up because there's a lot of people who are very pro-death in this, and there's a lot of people that we would classify as trolls, which is way too nice a term for these people because they're going around maiming people essentially because they think it's funny, because their life hasn't been very kind to them, so they figure that somebody else should have to live with being blinded for their entire existence, especially because now that they can't age, they won't die unless somebody actually kills them. Through this book we actually get to see John go through quite a few different iterations of his lifetime. It's still all the same lifetime, but there's these really big gaps between like when he got the cure and then like a few years later after something happens that I'm not going to tell you about, and then how that section of his life plays out, and then 20 years later after that and how that section of his life plays out. Mostly all I can say is an incredible thought experiment, but it also really bums me out about the state of just human beings in the world and how humans can be the worst. After that I picked up The Best Bad Things, and I thought this was a standalone until I was putting it onto Goodreads and found out there's actually a second book, which I didn't realize until after I'd finished this one, and I was very satisfied with that ending, but now that I know there's more, I'm very excited to read more. This book takes place in, I think it's the 1880s. I think it's January of 1887, if I'm remembering correctly. It says at the beginning of literally every chapter, but I don't have it right in front of me. I've already returned it to the library, so I can't verify that. And it takes place primarily in Port Townsend. However, at the very beginning of it, it kept talking about Victoria because it turns out that these people are in the smuggling business. They're smuggling opium and they're getting it via Victoria. So it'd be coming down from the capital city that I currently reside in. Our main character is named Alma, although throughout this book she primarily goes by a completely different name, and that's Jack. Before being part of this smuggling operation, she was actually kind of in a secret military type of situation, so she learned how to take on these different personas, and one of these personas was in male drag. You can also tell she very much enjoys being Jack, and for me the most interesting thing was just her describing the differences in how she would move her body and how she would dress her body and how she would just do things in general to become these different characters for whichever situation she happened to be in. The narrative of this book takes place over about 2 weeks, and we know at the very beginning that somebody is threatening her life and that she maybe shoots that person because we don't really know from that. And then we kind of flash forward to this point where she's working for this woman, and she's basically been brought into Port Townsend to figure out where there's a leak because some of the tar, as they keep calling it, has been going missing, and she's trying to figure out 1, what the operation her boss runs is, and 2, to figure out where this leak is. So it's basically her using all the tricks in her book to figure out who's running things and how things could be run better, and maybe she'll also be able to take over from the guy that's running things, especially because apparently he's not doing a very good job if there's leaks. This means she's using this alter ego to kind of get to know people around town and that type of thing, and very occasionally we'll see her go out in a female alter ego, or just even as herself, to do these different errands. I don't feel like I'm explaining it super well, but this was super fast-paced, very interesting. Also, this character is a bi icon because she wants to basically do everybody who moves. Not everybody, obviously, but there's like 3 people in this book that she's like, I actively want to do things to them, and I'm like, alright, that's great for you. Happy for you could never be me because I am way too far on the asexual spectrum for that. I think if you wanted to boil this down to why I really love this so much, it's a Western, but it's got a theater feel to it because we know this person is constantly playing different characters, and I absolutely love that. And we're seeing how much of her past informs her present, and this kind of multi-layered plan that she's working together to try to make sure that all the heat is off her operation and onto a rival's operation. And a lot of what she does is very, very, very dangerous. Like I said, I was satisfied with how this ended, but now knowing that there is a second book, I am so excited to pick it up when my library hold comes in. The other book I finished this week is Paper Girls: The Complete Stories. This is about an 800-page graphic novel that completely encompasses all 30 issues of Paper Girls, which I believe is also split up into either 5 or 6. What do you do it when it's not an omnibus? Volumes, there we go. This is something where I had read maybe the first volume or maybe even just the first few issues because I really did not remember very far into reading this at all. This starts out being about 4 girls who are 12 years old and they are doing their paper route on November 1st, aka Hell Day or All Saints Day, because it's the day after Halloween. There's still kids out doing post-Halloween shenanigans, and this is set in 1988. So we've got that nice throwback. As these 4 girls who have paper routes band together to kind of make sure they're safe this morning, one of them is actually jumped by some people who steal one of her walkie-talkies, and they decide to go track that down because those things are expensive. They're like $50 in 1888 money before taxes. However, by going to try to track them down, they actually fall into some time travel shenanigans. And by some, I mean a lot of time travel shenanigans. This is very much, holy crap, now we're in the future, now we're in the past, now I'm seeing different versions of myself. Are they clones? Are they me from the future? I don't know. I was reminded about this because I was looking at the Read Queer All Year prompts for January, and I was like, revisit your past. Okay, what is something I've read in the past that I could reread or something like that? And then I was just kind of scrolling through different graphic novels I could pick up from my library before I went offline to be in that cabin in the woods, and I was like, Paper Girls. I think Paper Girls had some queer content, and yes, it did. Although if you're gonna judge it by the queer content at the very beginning, it's not my favorite. There's definitely slurs thrown around and some very homophobic tendencies, and then by the end of the book, that person kind of fixes their ways a little bit, which was nice to see, but also is just like very jarring. In any case, I looked it up just to make sure there would be queer characters. There are queer characters. That's good to know going into this. And I just decided to read the entire story, which is what I did here. The art is really cool. I'm not going to pretend to be able to tell you every single little piece of the story because it's very, very wibbly wobbly, and yeah, there's a lot of just going back and forth, and this happened because of this, but this has already happened, and we know this already happened because this person has grown up, but this person doesn't remember it, and why don't they remember it, and that type of stuff. It was interesting, it was fun. I'm glad that certain characters were a little bit different by the end of it. And if you're the type of person that can get by the, sure, this is why this is happening, why not, timey-wimey stuff, then it's a good time. I don't know why I'm doing this. I need more coffee. As for the movie I watched this week, I was randomly sitting there reading Paper Girls, and I was like, I could go to the movies. I could go see Wicked again if I wanted to. That would be good. And I looked up to see what the next movie starting at the theater closest to me is that I would be interested in watching, and it turned out that movie was Nosferatu. Going into this, I knew very little besides the fact that when they originally made this film, I believe in the 1930s, the filmmakers were actually sued by Bram Stoker's widow because the story was basically the exact same as Dracula, and she won. So I knew going into this was a vampire thing and it was probably going to be very much like Dracula, and holy crap, it's basically Dracula. They didn't even try to change things. They like changed the name of the Count. They changed the fact that the guy going to talk to the Count in the mountains somewhere, clearly not Transylvania, was from Germany instead of from the UK. And then they changed how it ended. And those are the biggest differences, so I can see why Bram Stoker's widow won that court battle, because yeah, this is basically Dracula. As for the film itself, there was some cinematography that I very much enjoyed. All of the kind of shadow type of stuff that we've seen in other Dracula-esque things was there, but it was done really well. I really enjoyed seeing that. However, this was really, really slow paced in points, and I almost fell asleep a couple of times in the theater. But this also had a lot of sex and a lot of blood, so if you're into that type of thing. And also I just want to say I really admired the ability for certain actors to have these completely vulnerable scenes while dripping in viscera. That's not something you see every day, so good for them. Also, it wasn't until yesterday when I watched this film that I realized that Johnny Depp had a daughter who acts, and it's gotten to the point where everybody I watched when I was growing up in my teenage years now has kids who are now acting, and that's just weird. I understand that's how Hollywood has pretty much always worked, but it's just weird. I keep seeing these different actors and being like, huh, what's this person's deal? And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's the kid of so-and-so that I've seen in several things. The biggest surprise for that one was Robin from Stranger Things. I was like, oh, those two people had a kid? Wow, she's pretty. I mean, also an intelligent actress and all that type of stuff as well, but yeah, that was a big one for me. As for the audiobook I listened to, that was The Berry Pickers. This one also takes place over quite a few years because we see these two siblings when they are about 4 and 6. The brother is named Joe, the sister is named Ruthie, and then we're getting both of their perspectives throughout this book. However, we're getting their perspectives as they're growing up and when they're older. And instead of getting a perspective from Ruthie, we're actually getting a perspective from somebody called Norma, who is in fact the same person. Because when Ruthie was 4, she was kidnapped and then she grew up with a completely different family. Joe was the last of his family to see Ruthie before she went missing, so he's always felt personally responsible for this, even though he was literally a kid at the same time too. So he and his family go through a lot because of that. And we're seeing him progressing through life and just certain things that happen to him and certain things that he does that he's not proud of. And then we're also seeing the progress of her growing up and kind of knowing that she's different and not really knowing why, and living in this very protective environment where her mom just like never lets her leave the house and that type of thing. And also certain different things she decides for her life based on her mother's life. And yeah, I don't want to spoil things, but I do want to tell you that this was so freaking well written. One of the biggest things that I should probably mention about this is the fact that the family that we're talking about is indigenous, and they actually move between different locations depending on the season, because during berry picking season they're actually down in Maine working on this farm picking berries, and that's where Ruthie goes missing from, but the family primarily actually lives in Nova Scotia. And it's really interesting reading this, seeing the different people in question going between these two different regions, and then Joe also going basically all the way across Canada, stopping in various locations that I've actually been before, which is only fun for me because I love when what I'm consuming talks about places I've been before. And I was listening to this at the same time I was reading The Best Bad Things. That kept talking about Victoria. This kept talking about different locations I randomly went to on the road trip that we took in 2021, and then other times that I've been in other places. So it was just a good week for me for that. Like I said, this book was super well written. I highly, highly recommend it. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I'll see you very soon. Bye! I hate when people quite clearly in TV shows and movies sip from a cup and there's nothing in it. It annoys the crap out of me, so I'm not going to do that to you because I just finished this, but